Let's start with what I see all the time, the quiet loss of strength. It doesn't always happen with a big moment. No injury, no diagnosis, just a slow fade. You notice you don't get up from the couch quite as easily, or carrying groceries feels heavier than it used to. That's not just in your head. After 60, the body naturally starts losing muscle mass, about 1 to 2% each year if nothing is done to stop it. And when muscle goes, so does energy, balance, and confidence. You might feel more unsure on your feet, or even find yourself relying more on others for simple things you used to do on autopilot. I want you to hear this clearly. It's not weakness, it's biology, but it's also not irreversible. I've been working with older men for over 20 years, and this is one of the first patterns I look for. I remember a man named Frank, 68, retired postal worker from Dayton, Ohio. Frank was the kind of guy who used to be up with the sun, walk 10 miles a day when he worked. But after he retired, something shifted. He said it started with just relaxing a little, but over time relaxing turned into resting, and resting turned into sitting. By the time he came to me, he was avoiding stairs, letting his wife carry the heavy stuff, and feeling like a burden in his own home. The hardest part for him wasn't the stairs, it was that look he thought he saw in his wife's eyes, like she was worried he couldn't handle life anymore, and he believed her. But Frank didn't need a gym membership or boot camp workouts. What he needed was a reminder that strength isn't gone, it's just out of practice. We started small. A chair in his living room became his workout bench, 10 minutes a day, bodyweight squats, standing push-ups against the wall, and some gentle stretching. He used soup cans at first, then graduated to small dumbbells. He didn't love it right away, but after a few weeks, his balance improved. He could carry his own groceries again. He told me, "I don't feel young, but I feel useful again." That stuck with me. Another man, Robert, 72, from Arizona, told me his turning point was being able to stand up without using his hands. "That one movement brought me back," he said. "We underestimate how much a simple action can restore a man's sense of control." What often helps the most is finding just 1 or 2 exercises that feel doable and repeating them consistently. Wall push-ups, seated leg lifts, standing marches, and holding onto the back of a chair for balance exercises. These can be done in your living room, no special equipment needed. 10 minutes is enough, 2 or 3 days a week is enough. The key is that you're sending a message to your body, "I still need you," and believe me, your body hears it. I know it can feel like too much sometimes, especially if you haven't exercised in years or are dealing with joint pain or fatigue. But you don't have to be perfect. You just have to be willing to show up for yourself a little each day. Strength doesn't disappear, it just steps into the background. And when you invite it back, even slowly, you invite back a part of yourself that still remembers what it's like to feel grounded and proud in your own skin. Confidence doesn't come from pretending to be 20 again. It comes from knowing you can rely on your body to do what matters, even if it's just getting off the couch with your head held high. Another big confidence killer I often see is what no one wants to talk about: changes in sexual health. A lot of men over 60 notice things aren't working the way they used. Just not just physically, but emotionally too. Maybe the desire isn't there, or the body doesn't respond like before, or it takes longer, or doesn't happen at all. For many, it's frustrating and confusing, but what makes it worse is how silent it all is. Most men don't bring it up, not with their doctor, not even with their partner. And I get it, it's uncomfortable. But what I want you to know is that these changes are common. They're not a sign of failure, they're part of how the body ages, especially when blood flow, hormone levels, and sleep patterns start to shift. But staying silent creates a loop of stress, avoidance, and the more distance there was, the more convinced he became that this part of his life was over. What he didn't know, and what most men don't, is that these changes can be treated. We looked at his blood pressure. It was high. His blood sugar? Just over the edge into pre-diabetes. His sleep interrupted every night. He wasn't broken. His body was just sending him a signal. What often helps in these situations is starting with the basics. Check your numbers: blood pressure, blood sugar, weight, sleep. Those 4 things have a huge impact on sexual function and hormone balance. Even small improvements, losing 5 pounds, cutting sugar, sleeping more than 6 hours, it can change things. I also suggest adding magnesium, zinc, and omega-3s, safe and simple supplements that support blood flow and hormone health. But the most important step? Talk to your partner. Not to apologize, just to share. Say what's going on. Honesty reduces pressure. And if needed, talk to a doctor you trust. A good urologist sees this every day. You won't shock anyone, and you might walk away with real help. I always remind the men I work with, your value isn't tied to one function or one performance. You are more than what your body can or can't do on a given day. You are a person with warmth, history, and love to offer. Sexual confidence isn't about being flawless. It's about being present, honest, and open. You deserve connection, even if it looks different than it used. 2. You can still be wanted, still be close, still be fully you. The courage to speak is the first act of strength. The rest often follows. One more thing that slowly eats away at men's confidence is something many don't expect: losing their sense of purpose after retirement. I see this more often than you might think. A man spends 40 or 50 years building a career, waking up with a job to do, people relying on him, a structure to his day, and then one day it's over. There's no more time clock, no more calls, no more deadlines. At first, it feels like a well-earned break, but after a few weeks or months, the silence sets in, and for many, that silence turns into isolation. Not because the world suddenly changed, but because the role they built their identity around is no longer there, and that can be tough. I'm not talking about boredom. I'm talking about the deep, creeping feeling that you're no longer needed, no longer seen, no longer relevant. For men especially, so much of self-worth is tied to being a provider, a decision-maker, a contributor. Without that, confidence doesn't just dip, it unravels. I remember George, 66, from Peoria, Illinois. He'd been a foreman in a metal fabrication plant for over 30 years. Everyone knew him as the guy who could fix anything, keep a team moving, solve problems before they turned into messes. When he retired, he was looking forward to some quiet time, maybe fixing up the garage, finally organizing his tools. But 3 months in, his wife noticed he wasn't getting dressed in the morning. He started watching the same news loops all day, only leaving the house to get the mail. He'd stop mid-sentence, stare off, forget what day it was. He told me once, "I thought retirement was supposed to feel like freedom, but it just feels like disappearing." He wasn't depressed in the clinical sense, but he was disconnected. That spark, that steady rhythm he used to have, it just faded. And like a lot of men, he didn't know how to ask for something he couldn't name. He just knew he didn't feel like himself anymore. His family tried suggesting activities, but nothing stuck. Until one day his daughter asked if he could help her teenage son build a small deck in their backyard. He grumbled at first, but said yes, and something clicked. That small project turned into more. Neighbors started asking him for help. He started teaching the kid how to use power tools safely, and next thing you know, George was spending his afternoons mentoring young people at a local vocational school. He wasn't back at the plant, but he was back in motion, and more importantly, back in demand. What often helps in these situations is finding just one small way to plug back in, not to your old job, but to your sense of usefulness. Men's groups, woodworking clubs, community garden crews, or even online forums where you can share what you know. These aren't hobbies, they're bridges. Volunteering just a couple hours a week, offering to coach or mentor in an area you know well, or even starting a simple weekly meetup with other retired men in your neighborhood. All of these bring structure, social interaction, and that feeling of being relied on. It doesn't have to be formal. You just have to show up with your story, your experience, and your willingness to stay connected. You're not your resume. You're not your last paycheck. You're a man with decades of insight, humor, skill, and scars, and someone out there could benefit from that right now. You haven't been set aside. You've just stepped into a different season of life, and it still has meaning. You still matter, and when you offer your presence again, in any way, big or small, you'll be surprised how quickly life starts offering something back. Here's another one I hear more than people might think. The moment a man looks in the mirror and doesn't quite recognize himself, it might be something small at first. Maybe the hair's thinner or grayer than you remember, the skin a little looser, or the belly just won't go away like it used to. But for many men, it's not just about looks, it's about identity. Aging shows up in the mirror, and for a lot of guys, it feels like a loss of control. I've heard men call it fading out, or say they feel invisible, like they've been replaced by someone older, slower, duller. The truth is, your body does change. Muscle mass drops, skin, elasticity weakens, metabolism slows down, and that can take a toll on how you see yourself. But I'll tell you something that's just as true. How you feel in your own skin can still be shaped by simple habits. Aging doesn't mean letting go of self-respect, and it certainly doesn't mean disappearing. I remember Leonard, 70 years old, retired accountant from Austin, Texas. He used to dress sharp every day, even if he wasn't going anywhere special. Pressed shirts, polished shoes, always a clean shave. His wife told me it was just his thing, but after a couple of health scares and some hard months taking care of his brother, something shifted. When I saw him, he looked tired, unshaven, wearing an old hoodie and slippers in the middle of the afternoon. He shrugged and said, "What's the point? Nobody's looking." But when we sat down to talk, it became clear this wasn't just about clothes. He didn't feel like himself anymore. He felt like he'd aged 10 years in one. He said he stopped going to church and avoided group lunches with friends. It wasn't about shame, it was about feeling unseen, even by himself. I asked him what he used to enjoy about getting ready in the morning, and he smiled a little, like he hadn't thought about that in a while. That's when we started to build a small routine, not to impress anyone, just to reconnect with that feeling of dignity and care. What often helps is starting with a weekly check-in with yourself, something simple, like shaving every other day, trimming your nails, pressing a clean shirt for Sundays, or wearing a cologne that reminds you of a younger version of yourself. It's not about hiding age, it's about honoring it. One of the easiest ways to bring that back is to create what I call a respect ritual, a set of 2 or 3 grooming habits you do not because you have to, but because you still matter. It might sound small, but looking in the mirror and seeing someone you recognize again, someone cared for, put together, present, changes the way you walk through the day. And that shows whether you're meeting a friend for coffee or just sitting on your porch reading the paper. You are not your wrinkles or your hairline or your waistband. You are your presence, your kindness, your way of showing up. And all of that can still shine through when you care for yourself with intention. Think of it like watering a plant. It doesn't matter how old the tree is. If you keep tending to it, it still stands tall, strong, and alive. You deserve to feel good in your own skin, not because others are looking, but because you are. Something else that comes up more than you'd think, the quiet fear of becoming a burden. It usually doesn't start with a big event. It's subtle. Maybe you forgot to take your pills one day, or had a moment where your balance felt off, or you needed help opening a jar or finding the right word. At first you brush it off, but when those moments start to add up, many older men begin to worry, not just about their health, but about how it affects the people they love. That worry turns into guilt, and guilt turns into silence. I've seen men distance themselves from their own families, not because they don't love them, but because they're afraid they'll be too much. They don't want to cause trouble, so they stay quiet. But here's the thing, avoiding help doesn't protect your family. It isolates you, and it shuts out the very people who want to be part of your life, not just when everything's perfect, but always. I once worked with a man named Harry, 75 years old, from rural Vermont. He was a proud guy, former teacher, father of 3, loved working with his hands. But over time he started mixing up his meds and forgetting if he'd turned off the stove. One day he left the back door open all night and didn't even realize until the morning. Instead of talking to his kids, Harry just pulled back. He stopped going to family dinners, said he was too tired, avoided phone calls, even skipped his granddaughter's birthday. When I finally got the full picture, he told me something I won't forget. I just don't want them to remember me like this. What struck me was that he thought distancing himself was protecting his family, when in fact it was hurting everyone. His kids were worried sick, his wife felt helpless, and he was sitting alone with fears that could have been shared. After we talked, we made a few small changes together. A daily pill organizer with clear labels, a simple reminder app on his phone, and most importantly, a family meeting. He didn't give them a speech. He just opened the door a little. He told them what was going on. The relief was immediate. His daughter took over managing his prescriptions. His grandson helped set up voice reminders. The house didn't fall apart. It got stronger because now they were in it together. What often helps in cases like this is setting up a simple support system that makes daily tasks more manageable. Start with a weekly pill organizer, one that separates morning and evening doses, and keep it somewhere visible. If you use a smartphone, apps like MediSafe can remind you to take your medication and even alert a loved one if you miss a dose. Use sticky notes for key reminders or ask someone to help you create a daily checklist. The key is structure, not because you're weak, but because your brain deserves backup. And just as important, talk to your family. You don't need a long speech, just honesty. Say, lately I've noticed I'm forgetting things, and I want to make a plan together. That one sentence can turn fear into trust. Asking for help is not weakness, it's wisdom. It means you're choosing to stay connected, to face things with a team instead of alone. You're not a burden, you're still a father, a partner, a friend, and your presence matters more than you know. Think of it this way. Bridges are built not to hold back weight, but to carry it. And your family, if you let them, will carry with you not because they have to, but because they want to. You are not fading, you're still here, and you're allowed to live supported, not hidden. If you recognized yourself in even one of these moments, share in the comments which piece of advice spoke to you. It matters, not just for you, but for others who are reading along right now. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell. More warm and helpful videos are on the way to support your health and confidence. You are not alone. You're stronger than you think. And most importantly, life keeps going as long as you keep showing up for it.